Managers, what is the silliest reason you have had an employee call in sick? Story 1. A friend of mine, when he was in his early 20s, called in drunk. Friend, I can't come in. I'm a pretty drunk, boss. So you're sick and can't come in. Friend, nah, I'm just drunk. Can't make it, boss. New. You're sick, right? Friend, nah, man, I'm just kind of drunk, boss. Okay. And putting you down as sick. Get better soon. Story 2. They're superstitious and refuse to work on any Friday that falls on the 13th because something bad always happens to them. The same person also once told me he cut his hand on a banana. Story 3. Called in horny. Obligatory, not a manager. He was trying for a baby. Couple was deemed infertile, going through all sorts of treatments and therapies. Dude calls into the manager and says his wife is ready. Manager told him to take the day off. A few months later, they confirmed conception past 12 weeks. It was very exciting, but also strange. Story 4. Not really sick, but I know you're not going to believe this. Some homeless man broke into my house last night and stole all of my pants. I will not be able to make it in today because I have to file a police report and have no pants to wear. Turned out he had gotten drunk and put all of his pants into the recycle for some reason. Story 5. I'm not a manager, but I'm a floor installer and I run my own crew from time to time. We had this one guy who was constantly complaining about how broke he is and how he needs to work so badly. And yet he just didn't ever want to actually show up. Here is a selection of my favorite of his excuses. 1. There was a construction truck parked blocking his driveway. I thought, why not ask them to move? 2. Someone had allegedly been messing with him and slowly letting the air out of his tires. Clearly, they couldn't possibly be leaking. They were only 5 years old. 3. Someone had broken into his vehicle under cover of night, removed the motor that operates the windows, and replaced it with a burnt-out one on the driver's side. So now his window barely works. I mean, the car is only about 13 years old. Couldn't be wearing out by itself. We offered this dude a full-time job with a guaranteed permanent position if he proves himself. He proved that he would rather come up with any reason to not work. Story 6. Had a lady call in and say she couldn't come into work because everything was wrong. I asked her to elaborate. She said Venus was retrograde with Mercury, and because she's a Capricorn, she is vulnerable and can't come into work as everything is terrible. And like you're trying to call off work because your horoscope is wrong. She screamed, OMG, I knew you wouldn't understand. You were such an Aries, and slammed the phone on me. She didn't last long. Story 7. This doesn't count because I ended up going in not proud of it, but my boss and I got a hearty laugh. I was a landscaper back in my later teens. I had gotten drunk the night before with my buddies because the forecast said tons of rain in the morning. I get home and pass out, get a phone call in the morning from my boss asking where I was. Nearly comatose, I say, it's raining. Listen, he laughs and says, get to work. I told him my night and my thought process. He laughed even harder. It was a good day with a hangover as well. I've got back pain because I fell off the back of a motorcycle. That's fine, mate. Come in when you're, well, the doctor said it could be the motorcycle or it could be my office chair. Okay, well, if we're waiting on the results from the blood test, you're taking a blood test to see if your back pain is from sitting in an old chair or falling off a motorcycle. Yes, he just kept going until it was obvious he was lying. Story 8. Mine is about a girl who called in sick with a cold and sore throat. On their return to work, I asked if it had been started or caused by work, expecting them to say no. Instead, they said yes. Surprised, I asked them to explain. While I was making a pot noodle in the kitchen, and the window was open. So as I was opening the sachet of powder, the wind blew through the window, and all the power went down my throat. Hence my cold and sore throat. Story 9. When making her morning coffee, grounds out in her cup, and then her creamer was bad. So, because her coffee was all wrong, she couldn't come into work that day. Story 10. I once called in because I went too hard on leg day, and I never call sick unless if I am booked off. My boss didn't believe me and told me to come into work, which I did. I was 2 hours late. The boss and the CEO saw me waddling 5 centimeters at a time, and both told me to go home. I refused because I always put in all the effort to get there. Not going to waste it. Interestingly, I became a manager and am lucky to not have gotten any silly reasons. Story 11. Called in sick. We generally don't ask why for the first 2 weeks. After 2 weeks, we have to involve company doctor. Company doctor reported back. Breast enlargement. We were told by HR not to make a fuzz, even though it was not a good reason to call in sick. There was no previous history. Story 12. Not actually a silly reason to work, but still it's kind of related. I work at a small fast food restaurant, and it has very few staff. Way too few if you ask me. I cover a lot of shifts for my boss, like sometimes twice a week. I called in sick one day, and no one could cover my shift. My boss managed to convince one of my coworkers to cover 13 of my shift. He then told me I owe him one. Mate, you owe me way more than I owe you. Obligatory, not a manager, but go to tell on myself for a silly out sick reason. I once had to call out sick because my mother brought home a puppy, set it on my lap where he fell asleep, and then left to go out shopping, and I didn't know when she'd be back. I wasn't really a dog person, and I was the only one home, and this was a brand new animal in the house that I had to keep out of things, so I called in because I had a puppy asleep on my lap. My boss was less than thrilled that that was my reason, but the way I saw it, I had little other choice. The dog didn't have a crate or anywhere I'd feel safe leaving him for 5 minutes, let alone 5 hours, still kept my job and got to explain the situation better when I went in the next day. Boss was initially angry on the phone, but with more context and a chat with his wife, and he understood a bit better. Bonus icing on the shitty cake to that day. The puppy woke up at some point and started making a low, grumbly noise. I didn't know what he was doing, so I brought him over to my bed to pet him and check him over, make sure he was okay. He needed to pee, so he pissed on my bed. Sakes was a nighttime manager for a fast food place. During my first week, I had one of my people that helped close call in 3 times one night to call off. Call number 1, me hello. Girl, hey, I can't come in tonight. I don't think I have a ride in. Me, her sister works the same shift and is able to drive the car, and is due to work that night too. So, is your sister not coming in either? Girl, yes, but I can't. Me, okay, no problem, we'll make it work. Call 2 literally an hour later. Me, hello. Girl, hey, I can't come in tonight. I can't find any pants to wear with my uniform. Starts sobbing loudly into the phone. Me, it's okay, don't worry about it. Girl screams at the top of her lungs. I just want to find my pants. Call 3 about 3 hours in a shift, and her sister is there working. Me, hello. Girl, hey, I forgot to call to say I can't make it in. Me, okay, well, your shift started 3 hours ago, but it's okay, we aren't busy. Girl, I swear I'll make it up to you. Maybe we can go get a drink after you get out tonight. Me thinking what is going on here, no, that's okay. Just make sure it doesn't become a habit. Girl, it won't. Speaking with the girl's sister, I found out she had gone out with friends and was already at the bar. After we closed, I decided to go to the bar. I know she frequents. As soon as I walk in, she greets me, says she is buying me a beer, and said she was sorry she didn't show up. She was gone. The bartender asked if I was there to pick her up and take her home because if not, he was going to call someone else to take her. I took her home, and as soon as we pulled at her driveway, she freaks out, gets out of the car, runs up to her front door, and can't get it open. The girl's mom answers the frantic pounding and sees me standing there. The mom, you gotta be kidding me. Again, apparently this happened a lot with the last nighttime manager, but they would go back to his place, and he would sleep with her, and in exchange, he would fudge her hours to make it look like she was working. Needless to say, she ended up fired, and the sister left due to going off to college. Story 13, I used to work at a trampoline park, and we had one guy who was super greedy when taking parties. He called the store one day and would only speak to me since I was his favorite manager. He asked if there were any parties assigned to him, and I said no. He then replied with, "I'm not coming in. I don't feel too good." I told my general manager, and he said, "Bullshit," and wrote him up for it. Story 14, it was me. I phoned work to tell them I wouldn't be in because I had locked myself in my house. I had just moved house that weekend, didn't yet have a key for the back door, locked the front door Sunday evening from the inside, and went to bed. Woke up Monday morning, turned the key in the lock, and it just sheared off, leaving the door locked from the inside with remains of the key in the hole. Had to ring up the letting agent and get them to come let me out with their spare key. Was 4 hours late to work. There was much taking when I got to work. Story 15, had an employee call in sick, saying it was the flu. An hour later, he checked in at George Webb Milwaukee restaurant chain on Facebook and posted a photo of himself standing in a line outside of the restaurant that was 3 or 4 blocks long, waiting for a free hamburger that the restaurant was giving away because the Milwaukee Brewers won 12 games in a row. Story 16, not in a managing position, but man, I do love the stuff I hear in the office. During lunch break, there was this overweight lady discussing something with a coworker. I didn't pick up the conversation, but all I heard was your hate and negativity against me are so painful I might throw up. Half an hour later, I hear from her boss that she threw up in the restroom and had to go home since she doesn't feel safe right now. Dude then asked me if I know anything, and I said no, as I didn't want to get involved. He further asked how often I've been sick in the last 3 years. Tell him I have no recorded sick days in the last 3 years, and he just goes, wow, that must be hard. I am like TF. Story 17, some of my favorites when I was a manager. I can't come in today, cause it's too windy, and I can't drive my car. I can't come in today, because my cell phone broke. I need to go buy a new one. Call it from my friend's phone. I can't come in because I missed the bus, and being an hour late won't be worth the money ID, make being there on time. I can't come in today because my work pants ripped, and I don't have any other pairs. You can just wear normal pants today. No, that wouldn't be professional and fair to you. Story 18, I had someone call off because their electricity was out, and she couldn't blow her hair dry. I told her drive with her windows down and hung up. Had to fire her a few weeks later as she got arrested for beating up the new girlfriend of one of her baby daddies. Story 19, my manager. But my own boss calls in sick so frequently that we don't even ask why anymore. Oh, Devin is sick, shocker. In the last 2 months, he's had the chicken pox and like 3 colds. The kicker is that when I try to call out, happened once. I had a bad fever, he guilts me into working. He does the same to my employees. I also have an employee who goes home early all the time once a week, or so because her daughter starts fights at school. So either she's lying or her daughter is a very violent 4-year-old, and someone should be concerned. Story 20. My 4-year-old daughter came out into the yard to watch me install a chain-link fence. It involved digging lots of post holes in the hard as stone red clay in Alabama. In August, it was hot. She sat on a block of concrete and just watched as the sweat beaded up on her brow. I wondered why she didn't at least move over to the shade or maybe sit inside in the AC and watch through a window. Eventually, I asked her what she was doing. Supervising. Do you know what supervising means? She sighs. Mostly means being very, very patient. Story 21. I just had a good sick versus vacation day lie a few weeks ago. Not necessarily an excuse, but just a straight-up lie. I run the rental department for a group of heavy-duty truck dealerships, box trucks, 18-wheelers, dump trucks, school buses, etc., which means I end up going to the DMV a lot to get tags for new rental trucks, etc. I also have two of my own separate shops from the rest of the dealership to work on my own trucks, and my own trucks only. One Monday, I had a young, new mechanic call into my shop manager, saying head caught a stomach bug over the weekend. Wasn't feeling much better yet, hadn't slept, etc. Shop manager tells me he's out. My guys do the best they can while down a mechanic. After lunch that day, I go to DMV to title and register 2 new trucks. Side note, in bigger towns, DMV will occasionally have separate windows for dealers and another for large fleets. Who do I see in a line for the general public registering his new crotch rocket? Guy who called in sick, just called out his name quietly and waved and told him I was glad he felt better. He used to call out sick every once in a while on a Monday. We usually assumed he was sleeping off a bender. Anyway, he hasn't called in sick on a Monday since then. Story 22 from me as the employee and not the manager. 1. I got bit by my cat and had to go to the ER. I spent all night there. I had to get all sorts of 4 antibiotics. I called my boss the next morning saying I couldn't come in for a cat bite. He said, "You are not coming in because of cat bite, whatever." Click, I come the next day, all bandaged up, and he's apologizing. His wife is a nurse. And when he got home and told the story, she yelled at him and explained how serious it could be. 2. The day prior, I went tubing down a river and didn't put sunscreen on my legs, and I get a bad sunburn. I can hardly stand or walk, it hurts so much. There's only me and another girl who do the job we do. She works AM and I PM. If one calls in sick, they have to work a double. So I call in sick for a sunburn. She's like, whatever, it's kind of BS, but it'll cover for you. I come in the next day in shorts and sandals because I could not have pants touching my legs. Totally against dress code. She sees how bad the sunburn is and says, "Holy, I didn't realize how bad it was. Do you want to go home?" Story 23. A girl called in once because she had gotten back from vacation on Saturday and she needed another day to recover. It was Monday. She was PRN and made her own schedule. She would also ask if she could come in a couple hours late. She worked as a tech in a hospital, so she would relieve someone else. Story 24. One of my employees was arrested for drug dealing, and I got another employee to cover his shift. The covering employee never showed up, never replied to calls or texts. I was worried enough that I had HR do a wellness check with her family. Turns out, she had car trouble that morning well before her shift, which was also resolved well before her shift, but she was so angry over it she just decided she couldn't work and didn't want to talk to anyone, so she just didn't answer her phone. I fired both employees. It was a rough week. Story 25. He wanted to take paid leave for a Friday. I knew his favorite band was in town that Friday, and their concert would start right around the time work was set to get out. Instead, I put him on 24 hours sick time, basically paid time off, and the company only starts tracking it if it exceeds 24 hours, and told him to enjoy the concert. Story 26. I had a coworker who had some serious delusions of grandeur, but only when he was calling in sick. His name was Cash Jordan, not really. But imagine something equally fun to say. He called in because he was expecting a super important call from the President of the United States, Bush at the time. He had to go advise the president on a matter of foreign affairs. He had to personally stop the Italian mafia from coming to the town. He busted up a drug smuggling operation. He claimed he was on his way to work and found out there was an ongoing shootout between the police and a Mexican cartel. So he went there to stop it. When he got out of his car, the cartel leader shouted, "It's Cash Jordan." Everybody stopped shooting. A nuke was accidentally armed, and he had to go input the codes to shut it down because no one else knew them. This apparently made him 14 minutes late for work. He was late because a rabid group of fangirls descended on him demanding autographs, and he had to escape through a back route. A shipment from China containing poison baby formula was coming into town, and he had to go make sure it was destroyed instead of ending up on supermarket shelves. He had to go tail some ambassador to make sure they weren't up to something shady. He had to go sign paperwork involving a border dispute. He had to go take photos with the Queen of England to improve her reputation. Mind you, these are all excuses that he gave to the bosses at a near minimum wage job. While calling in as an excuse for why he was late or not coming in, eventually he got canned for too many tardies and absences. I think they only kept him around to see what crazy head come up with next. Story 27, not a manager, but the employee asking for PTO. I once asked my boss if I can take 2 days off to go to Area 51 on Sep. 20th to 19, he actually laughed out loud because I didn't sugarcoat it with made-up family stuff. I felt like he appreciated it. Story 28, I once had an intern text me at 9 p.m. on Thursday to tell me that they're sick and couldn't make it on Friday. I knew she was going out that night and getting drunk off her rocker because I overheard a conversation she had. I told her that just as a heads up, it's usually best to call in sick the morning of and not preemptively. Story 29, I used the OL food poisoning call-in reason. Real reason was I had an interview at a different company. What I didn't know was 3 other coworkers had interviews at different companies on the same day. 2 of them also had food poisoning, and one was my kid got sick. Quite hilarious the next day when our boss asked what or where we ate. All named 3 different foods, 3 different places. I'm sure he knew something was up as he just laughed at us. Story 30, I had a subordinate once call in sick because he accidentally closed his recliner on his cat and apparently chopped its tail off. The next evening, I asked him what his cat's name was, and he couldn't answer. Story 31, I'm not a manager, but I did once have a weird reason for calling off. My car died right as I was pulling into my garage. My neighbor had to help me push in the rest of the way. My girlfriend lent me her car to take to work. I drove down to the corner station to top off the tank. Her car died at the gas station. This was at about 9 p.m. on a Saturday. No rental place was open. No one I could call for a ride or borrow another car. I had to call off because I had no way of getting there. People thought I was calling off to get a 3-day weekend. Story 32, not calling sick, but I once had a girl show up 2 hours late because her tire pressure indicator turned on, and instead of going to a gas station, she went to a dealership where she had to wait for somebody to put air in the tires. Story 33 had a guy who lived within eyeshot of the business. You could look out the front door and see his house. He called in because his car wasn't working. At first, we assumed that he was stuck somewhere with a broken car, but a few minutes later, another employee pointed out that he was currently out front working on it. Still don't know if he just genuinely did not want to walk to work, or he thought that a 3-minute walk was too far on foot. Story 34 a.m., not manager, but have heard lots of excuses that have made me and coworkers and boss laugh. Quite often, or some are just super messed up in general, but this one, so far, has really taken the cake. We have a really religious cook that works with us. Not judging that part, but it's the relevant reason. One day, she found out that one of the other cooks is atheist and called out the next day, saying she refuses to come back in because that cook is broken and needs to be fixed until she's fixed. She wants vacation pay. She's still not back, but calls every day to ask if she's fixed yet. Story 35, I called in sick, cause my car wouldn't start. Planned on waiting for AAA, but they never made it out to me. They had over 350 calls that morning in our county cause it was minus 35. Story 36, we had an 18-year-old working with us just doing odd data input stuff. He was the manager's son and pretty lazy. One day, he called in sick because he was too tired. The reason he was too tired was because had watched a scary movie the night before and couldn't get to sleep. Luckily, his dad wasn't up for his BS, and he was fired. Story 37, I saw one on my LinkedIn feed where a guy canceled all his meetings for a day because had a dream that there would be a car crash on the motorway that day. Imagine getting that call. So you're not coming in because there's been a crash. Where was anyone hurt? What do you mean there's not actually been one? A dream. Story 38, not a manager, but a coworker once called out with the following excuses. He claimed he had gastrointestinal fever. He claimed a kidney stone ricocheted off his spleen. He claimed his car would only ever start on the 3rd try. Edit formatting. Story 39, I had someone who said I'm not coming in today because reasons. HR had a long talk with them for that. Edit to clarify. The person never gave a reason, medical or otherwise. They said because reasons, which I'm sure annoyed management that they used internet slang to call into work. They were very stuffy. Story 40, a girl who had worked at my store a few years ago returned when we needed new cashiers. After just a handful of weeks working with us, doing a great job and being very friendly, I might add, she started calling in last week saying she couldn't get to work because her car was broken down and wouldn't be fixed until, conveniently, the hour after her shift would have ended. She did this for 2 shifts in a row. For the 3rd attempt, the store manager offered to drive the girl to work. The store manager rarely gets days off and often has to come in and pick up everybody's slack, and she was offering to go out of her way to drive this girl to work. Of course, the girl never responded to that offer, and we haven't heard from her, now, a week later. Story 41, couldn't make it to her 4 a.m. to 8 a.m. shift because of church. Similarly, couldn't make it to her 12 a.m. to 4 a.m. shift because her family was in town. These are 2 separate women. I highly doubt Jesus or your mother want to spend time with you that early in the morning. Story 42. I had somebody call up because they had a rash and was sure it was smallpox, so they were going to go to the doctor to see if they could get some cream to put on it. Story 43. Not calling out sick. But at one company I worked at, they decided to give us 3 extra pay days off for religious holidays. I am an atheist, so I used 2 of mine for the first 2 days of the NCAA men's basketball tournament. Everyone I worked with had a laugh. College basketball is your religion. I won the office pool that year too. Story 44. Former manager. A guy called in and said that he already had started his laundry process and forgot that he needed to be at work. He wondered if it could be considered a sick day. Story 45. I'm usually impressed if they bother to make up an excuse, but I've heard a lot of best was from a cook who got saved one Sunday and told me he was waiting to hear from his new preacher if it was okay to work at a bar. He threatened to sue me for religious discrimination when I told him not to bother. Story 46. I used to manage a popular pizza chain. Had a delivery driver call out because his tire came flying off his car while driving down the road. Before I could ask him about the tire, he mentioned that he went after it, but the tire rolled into a river. Dude would always miss work, but this was the golden excuse. Story 47. I called out one day to my shitty job at a call center because my sandal broke while I was walking there. LOL. I can't walk the rest of the way barefoot. I didn't give about that job. And the day I finally quit, I just walked out in the middle of my shift. Also at a different job, I gave my friend a good reference, and she ended up getting hired. Well, that was a huge mistake because she was a terrible employee and called out all the time. One day, she called in saying she couldn't come in because she had gone to the cabin for the weekend and decided to stay longer. She got fired after like 2 months. Story 48. Technically, you can't ask for a reason for sick, as sick is sick, and they don't get to know your medical info. So if you all are volunteering reasons for sick, that's kind of bananas and not the kind that cut you. That doesn't mean you won't get fired. It just means you don't have to volunteer sick info unless it is relevant to your work situation, like you are a carrier of a deadly virus that spreads through paperwork or something. Story 49. Swedes called in sick for being gay during the 70s, since homosexuality was considered a disease. Story 50. He called in Friday for his Monday shift because he was blind, had to wait out the weekend to go to a specialist. Doctors gave him 3 weeks off even though they didn't find anything wrong after scans. He claimed he could barely see. 2 weeks and he walks in for his paycheck. Oh, you can see now. How are you able to see the door and see me and drive here? Story 51. When I worked in a restaurant, we had this 16 to 17-year-old food runner who used to shift dodge a lot. Always a wedding, a christening, a couple times a month, that sort of thing. She used to get her mom to call us for her too, and it was always a Saturday night or a Sunday lunchtime when she'd do this. Anyway, on a really busy day, think it might have been Father's Day, can't remember, her mom calls and says she was on her way to work when she was hit by a car. Obviously believable for anyone else, but for her it was like, come on, this is the 3rd shift this week, something's come up literally 15 minutes before you're due to work. Think I remember my boss saying something along the lines of, if she gets too anxious to work the big shifts, well, probably have to find someone else, etc., etc. Then she sent us a bunch of pics of her completely laid out at the hospital. Came back a couple months later, still making BS excuses. Only this time management couldn't call her out because the one time they expressed their doubt, she really had got up on the way to work. Story 52. Once had a coworker say she had forgotten she had a court date that would have her unable to work for the entire day. She was calling out for a Sunday. Story 53. One time an employee called me to tell me he wouldn't be able to make it into work because when he was sitting on the toilet taking a mirror that was hanging behind him fell off the wall and onto him. He claimed the mirror shattered and cut his lower back, and I didn't even know what to say. I just accepted the fact that he wasn't going to be there that day. Story 54. I am an alcoholic who used lots of excuses to get out of working weekends. I told my boss my grandfather passed away and I needed to travel for the funeral. A week later, I said my grandmother died using the broken heart death excuse and needed to go back. No one really said anything cause it does occasionally happen, and it's tough to call someone a liar on that. My grandfather had been dead for years and my grandmother is still alive and kicking 10 years later. I still feel bad for that one. Same job, golf course. I was driving a golf cart with my foot stupidly hanging off, and I squished my ankle between the cart and a cement pole. The next day, I literally couldn't walk on it, so I called in. That one was true, but stupidly self-inflicted. Story 55. We don't require a reason for people to call in. We don't have sick days per se, just an absence policy that tracks truancy and eventually results in termination. If they bring in a doctor's note the next day, they don't get dinged for the absence, no problem. When people call in, I want their name, their employee number, and the shift they'll be missing. This is Gene Valjean, 24601. I'm going to miss my 4 p.m. shift today, Monday the 28th. What I get instead is a voicemail that's either, yo, I didn't make it in, bruh, or, hey, is this the office? I work there, but this big incomprehensible came right at gibberish then on Thursday. My KSSHHHHD. So, I don't want to let you guys down, but PSSHHHH thanks. Story 56, my first summer job. There was one guy who would call in sick constantly, to the point that if someone else in the plant needed something from him, they'd just call his favorite pub and ask them to hand the phone over to Bob. Hey, I know you're sick at home, but I can't find the... Story 57, I'm pretty relaxed with my team. My golden rule is just don't take the I got in recently to find a post on my desk saying not in today in my colleague's easily recognizable scrawl and thought, well, I guess he's not in today. No big deal. Story 58, I once emailed my boss drunk the day before my shift because the night was about to get real, was in Montreal, and I think in second or third year university, school was an hour outside of Toronto. Boss's name was Dominic. He was ex-US Navy. Email said this, hey, Big D. I'm in Montreal and going to be way too drunk to drive back to Toronto. I'm going to go keep drinking throughout the night and don't anticipate my situation changing for the better in the next 12 to 18 hours. It's American spring break here, and the whole city is filled with 19-year-old girls who don't know how to handle their alcohol. See you Tuesday, Matt. Story 59, I was managing the biggest Wendy's in my mall, which was over 9 staff, and one day, I felt so sick woke up with actually a poo in my bed and thought, oh God, no way, that's so gross. When I got into work, I drink a whole bottle of Pepto-Bismol, and it made my stomach way worse actually, so I started to burp a lot and asked Ricky if he could be the manager for today. I'm simply too ill to deal with the day-to-day operations of the largest Wendy's in my mall. Well, the next day, I get a call, and Ricky says gig's up, and the manager now, boy, so don't come in. Story 60 friend of mine used to use the old my nan-granddad passed away trick. He ran out of grandparents to lie about fairly quickly, but the whole wall had been dropping hints as to his huge Polish Catholic family. So whilst long before he could start using great uncles and aunts, was hilarious watching him make up dead people for every hangover. Story 61, my mother is a manager, and recently an employee called in on a Wednesday to take Thursday and Friday off because she had a headache, at least wait to see if it goes away or pop an ibuprofen. Story 62, recently I've had a few different staff members not show up, and when asked about it in an attendance management meeting, they've claimed, I'm a gamer so I stay up late, and then forgot to get up for work, am sitting there thinking, WTF I game but don't miss work apparently, they're going to be the next ninja, or some. What's worse is we are so understaffed that these folks don't lose their jobs over it, just a slap on the wrist and told to be better. Story 63, this makes me so happy. My first job was at a place where my father was my boss's boss. He ensured that all policies were followed with me to the letter, and when I did get fired, only time I've been, he reviewed my unfair dismissal case and threw it out with HRS help. Story 64, his computer wasn't working. He told me this over a video chat using software only installed on his non-working computer. I said sorry to hear, but what computer? This one is fine, and waited, smiling silently, as he went beet red and played it off as I was sleep-deprived and must have tried using an old laptop. Haha, gee, it's like losing your glasses on your head. Yes, hilarious?